All right, so firstly, this is what happens when you go from a previous version of Maya into a later version of Maya and you haven't deleted your history. You can see that it just gets tore up, right? And then this is what it's supposed to look like. All right, so let's just delete that guy. All right, so this is not what your startup file will look like. I'll show you that in a second. But I wanted to show that the UVs for this are laid out. So if you do decide I want to texture this, color this, whatever, you can definitely do that and not have to worry about doing that step. Okay. So this is what your file will look like when you open it. I'll save that. So on the canvas, it says Sarcona Chickster. You're going to download that and replace it with whatever your last name is, Chickster, and that's going to be your project folder. So it'll have your scenes, your source images, the whole lot. Oops, there it is. And then, well, that's where you're going to work on next after your Pokeball. So this is what it's going to look like when you get in there. Now, if you don't see the eye, you may not have set your project. So make sure every time you come in, you set your project, you tell Maya what you're working on, and then you can go ahead and open it, and then it should show it, okay? So there is an eye texture in here, so obviously you don't have to worry about that. There you can assign basic materials to things. I don't have lights in the scene, so nothing showed up. Let me just create a light real quick. You don't have to add any fancy texture. You can strictly go with just a coloration of him versus having an actual texture to him. Oh, he doesn't have. No, he should. Render, yes. Crank this up a lot. There he is. He's hiding. Ooh, it was too much. There we go. Okay. So he has an eye texture. He has a flat gray. So we can fix that. Now, I kind of already showed a little bit about how to. This guy is going to get set up. But just to kind of reiterate some of that stuff, he's going to be different than the Pokeball. His biggest difference is that he is soft and squishy versus the Pokeball, which is hard, rigid metal objects, okay? So the first one is something you use for products, cars, robotic things, anything that doesn't have any deformation as it's moving around. That's how you would rig something like that, parenting everything together. Because the Chickster guy is soft and squishy, we need to do a skinning, and a skinning is basically connects the joints to the Chickster guy and lets it bend into form and squash. So this one here needs joints inside here, okay? So in this case, just like the other one, we need to get them in specific spots. There is no exact spot for this because of he doesn't have bones, right? So his joint could really rotate from here or a little bit lower or a little bit higher, a little bit further back or a little bit whatever. So you have some areas that you can play with to get, the joints in the right spot. You're going to rig him and animate him. So I'm going to start off with my joint tool. And with a character like this, we talked about a little bit on the first one, the Pokeball, we always have to figure out what our center of gravity is, okay? And so for like a person, your center of gravity is basically your hips. So that's what we want to use as the center of our character is the hips on Chickster. So somewhere around this area, that's its hips. Doesn't have to be perfect, just somewhere around there. If it's over here, if it's over there, it's not going to be a huge deal, just somewhere in that region. I'm going to go to a side-by-side view, whoops, like this, because I'm going to be putting joints in this view and in this view, okay? So my next joint that I'm going to put in here is going to be right at the hip area, okay? So where his leg, I'm not going to stand on the table and show you my leg, but where his leg would then bend from the waist. So I'm going to put that about here. Now as I put that here, notice that in the other view it doesn't center it there, right? So if you look at where this is, that's not centered, it's like off to the back. That will screw up how he moves. He'll actually bend from the back of his leg, not from the center of his leg, which is where it should be bending from. So if I left click to add joints, I can middle click to move joints. Okay? So I left click to add it here, and then I middle clicked to move it into the right region. Okay, so that's about where I need it. Now I'm going to come down here to where the knee is. Now for the knee does kind of bend more in the front than it does like in the back. So I'm going to put that more towards the front versus right in the center or right in the back. Okay, and then I'll come into this view and I'll just make sure that it's lined up with the center of it there. Then I'm going to come down here for the ankle and do the same thing. So there's about an ankle spot there. Make sure this is centered. That looks pretty good. Now I need to put him in for the feet. So I'm going to... What was that? Pretty close, yeah. Doesn't have to be exact. Like the other one, we had to get it exact because you had a cylinder and then a tube. So if that was off at all, then it's going to rotate kind of weird. This one, we have a little bit more freedom because everything's tied together. All right, so now I'm going to go to the top view here, and I'm going to draw where these are. The more joints you have, the more deformation you can add to your character, okay? So if, let's say, we had a snake, I would put joints like all over that snake because I want to be able to deform and make him wiggle. If I had a joint at the head of the snake and a joint at the tail of the snake, he would move in a very rigid form. He would not be able to bend at all, okay? With that said, on his feet, we could add a bunch of joints, like your fingers. There's a joint right there, there's a joint there, there's a joint there, and then there would be we would put a joint right at the tip, even though there's not one, okay? For Chickster, we're only going to put a joint in the center and a joint at the end, okay? That will give us plenty of room for him to wiggle around. So, sorry, the base, there we go, then the center, then the end, okay? Now, this is not in the right spot. You can see from here, this is definitely above where it should be. If I middle click and move that one down, that works. If I hit the up arrow and middle click and move that one down, that works. Hit the up arrow, middle click, move that one down. Okay? So that's an easy way for me to go back and adjust them. Now, if I go back up one more step to where the ankle is, I can start drawing the joints for the other toes. So then I'll do the same thing on this side. And it might be hard to see, just suck it up and figure it out. So there's the base, there's the middle, there's that. It is a bunch of scribbles. Okay, up arrow again, middle click and drag, up arrow again, middle click and drag. Now with this too, you may need to adjust them. Your toes and your fingers actually do bend like more from the top than they do like right from the center. We're not going to get that close to them, so it's not terribly important that you get it so close to the top, but for fun, pay attention to that stuff.
With this, will we have to worry about like bending his toes and all that?
Yes, because what's going to happen is if you don't bend his toes and he goes to walk, because we're going to make a walk cycle with him, he'll do this, boom, boom, like that. So we need to be able to bend his toes so that we can have him actually plant his foot down. Like a Chickster. All right, now this one I added, and I went up way too far. Like, I think this is at his hip. Yep, that's at his hip. So I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to hit the down arrow. There we go. Get back there. And then I'll add in the next one here. Oops, or here. There we go. And then the same thing, middle click and drag. A lot of repetition in these, which is good because this is the stuff that, you know, can make or break your animation. All right, so all that stuff is cool. Now I'm going to go back up to the top here. Okay. So now I'm going to put a joint back here. I like to put one by the rear of the creature. Okay, something like that. In the video that's on Canvas, I show how to control these things a little bit different, okay? You could go through and add joints to those and animate the joints going back and forth, and that would give them this kind of like wavy look. But what I show in the video how to do is make these things more dynamic so that we don't have to worry about them, that Maya will actually take care of the dynamics of it, so that as the Chickster moves his head up and down or left and right, that these things will actually automatically move. They'll be dynamically moving, okay? So if I don't do it exactly the same way here that I'm doing in the video, that's fine. Follow the video one because that one shows you the exact stuff. All right, so I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to add some more joints in here. Oops. If I make a mistake, I can hit backspace or undo. If you weren't aware of this, most of your like neck and back, they pivot from the back, right? Because that's where your spine is, right? So that's where I'm kind of putting these. If he had a mouth, I would branch this off further. So I would actually have like a joint up here for the top of the jaw and a joint for the bottom of the jaw. That way I could open and close the mouth. He doesn't have one on purpose, so he doesn't have one. I'm going to put an extra joint here and then an extra joint there. It's always, well, not always. It's usually better to have extra joints versus not enough joints. Because if you have extra joints and you get to this point of having skinned it, that's fine. You can just not use them. If you don't have enough joints, then you have to go back and undo stuff and then add the joints and then figure it out. Mm-hmm.
That's probably a stupid question, so don't laugh at me.
Okay.
Can you have to rig like the eyelids too and stuff to make it blink?
You are going to make it blink, but I show a different way to make it blink, okay? So one of the ways that you may be thinking of, okay, we're using joints, so we would put joints along the eyelids, right, and then do that. No, there's a thing called a blend shape, which I'll show, which allows us basically to create a slider, and we just make it look like, what does it look like when he's blinking, what does it look like when he's not blinking, and Maya figures out the in-between stuff. It's super awesome. It's much better than it was years ago. All right. So now that we have joints inside here, I need to start labeling stuff. So I'm not going to label all these, but I'm just going to show the process of left thigh or hip. Left hip. I hit the down arrow, left knee. Hit the down arrow, left ankle. Okay, you get the process of that. Label the feet, label the toes, everything, right? When we duplicate it, same thing we did to the Pokeball, we can mirror it over to the other side. The reason the mirroring works is my model is exactly right on that line. If he was off, mirroring wouldn't work. So we have to make sure that he's lined up right. Oops, that's the mirror skin weights. I need to go to skeleton mirroring. There we go. And then the same thing, we could search for left and replace it with right. We're mirroring in the XY direction, and boom. There it is. Okay. And now, just like before, you always want to test your joints out before you go any further. So I want to make sure that everything is rotating the correct way. So when I grab these two and I rotate them, they should both rotate the exact way together. Okay. If for some reason one rotates backwards, I need to fix that. So there and there. All right. I'm so perfect. Everything worked out great. That's awesome. Let's pretend that one of these did not work out perfectly. Okay. And I'm going to grab this joint here. I'm going to go to my skeleton, and I'm going to say orient joints. Reset that. X, Y, Z. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So I'm going to reorient these, and now we may get an issue. Probably not. Probably not. Nope. So just that good. Just that good. Yep, those are good too.
Orient them in relation to the other mirrored side.
To themselves. Okay, so let's sidebar this, and then we'll go to create some joints. Okay, so we'll go here. All right. So as I created these joints, I created them in this kind of like rounded fashion, right? So if I go and I grab this joint and I go to rotate, do you see how it's like angled to rotate? So if I were to grab this direction, it rotates that one perfectly around it. Okay. Same thing here, perfectly around it. Now here's the difference. Let's say I grab a joint and I draw a straight line. Okay, and then I go through and I move them into position. Okay. There we go. So now I grab this joint and I go to rotate. Look at how that rotator is no longer like lined up with the way the joints are going. That's what orient does. It says, what's the joint before me doing? What's the joint after me doing? And it makes sure that everything's kind of flowing in that same direction, okay? Because right now, if I try to rotate this, that looks horrible. If you had a machine that had a specific rotation, maybe, but I've never run into that case. Okay. So if I go to orient, what it's going to do is it's going to figure all that stuff out and then re-rotate all the joints so that now they're going to rotate correctly. Okay. Now, if I grab these one at a time, maybe this one will mess up like the other one I wanted to. Nope. Just too good, Sean. You're just too good. Just ignore that. All All right, so I'm going to purposefully mess up one of my joints. That way you can see what I need to do to fix it. Yes, yes. Come on. I'm too good to make mistakes. Look at that. It's like Maya just knows. Like, nope, I'm not going to let you. Not today. Try that again. Fate. No, it really won't let me. What are you doing, Maya? Come on. Menu live. Fate. Let me reset my tool. Maybe that's off. No. Alright, it should be letting me select that one. It's not letting me select that one for some reason. Can't even select that one. Okay, there we go. I just had to zoom out. It's too close. Alright. So, this thing could be rotated the wrong way. So, let's say I just rotated this upside down. So, what's going to happen now is that when I grab this joint and that joint, and I go to rotate it, one joint is going to rotate this way, the other joint's going to rotate that way. So, they should go like this, right? They should go and rotate together. One's going to go like this, so it's going to be weird. See that? Okay. So what we have to do is rotate it around. So what you do is we look at, let me zoom out really far, I guess. What we do is we look at these X, Y, and Z, and you can pretty much see the problem right away. Ignore this one. The tips don't matter because it's just the tip. It doesn't rotate at all. But if you look at the Y in this one, and you look at the X is pointed down to the next joint, and the Y is pointing up. The next one, X is pointing down to the next joint, and the Y is facing down, okay? So that's what has to happen is the Y just needs to flip and be on the top side, not the bottom side. So I grab that joint and I rotate it. Now this does have to be accurate because what could happen is we want to rotate nicely here. If it's off, it'll rotate like off to the side, and that's a bad thing. So if I rotate, nothing happens on the right side there. You can't see like a rotation value, but Maya internally has something going on. So I'm going to hit undo after I rotate because I want to click on the script editor and see this. Okay, so this command that's right there, that's the command for rotating that joint 171 degrees. Okay. Typically, it's going to be 180 degrees is all we have to do to rotate it, because usually it's like on the bottom, it needs to come up. So what I'm going to do is copy this with my middle mouse and drag it down here, change my 171 to 180, and then I'm just going to hit Control-Enter and run it. And what that does is it just runs that script to make it flip the other way. There we go. Okay, so now it's facing the correct way. Y is up. Done. Okay, so you want to check all of them because, again, this is something that once we get to a certain point, we'd have to undo in order to fix it. Cool. All right, so there's the Chickster's bones. Okay. So what I recommend doing at this point is obviously saving as, because once you go beyond this, if you mess up, you have to come back to this point to fix it. So I would say Tarcona, Chickster, B for rigging. Oops, skinning. There we go. And then we'll save it as, again, after skinning. Okay. So now I'm going to take this joint stuff here, this piece of skin there, and I'm going to go to Skin, Bind Skin, Option Box. I'm going to set this to Joint Hierarchy. That means basically you have these joints selected. All the joints that are in that list will be part of that parenting or will be part of that skinning, okay? Certain cases you may not want to do that. Let's say you had a machine. The machine has a vacuum bag or something on it that you want to be able to manipulate, something like that, or a hose on it you want to be able to manipulate. You may have joints just for the hose. You don't want the whole machine to be deformed, okay? So you may do just selected joints or just selected geometry. For our bind method, we're going to go geodesic voxel. And for our skinning method, we're going to go dual quaternion. So what it's going to do is it has to figure out how to arrange this, right? So we have a joint here and we have a piece of skin. How does it figure out which points are part of that joint, okay? So what those two things do, and you don't need to know exactly the math behind them, but it's basically a mathematical formula for which points get parented to which piece of skin, okay? Especially areas like this here. Now, let's do this. I guess we can do that too. So let's just take this and, oops, this and this. And you'll have to see Chickster without an eye for a second. Just ignore that. It's creepy looking. Okay. All right, so we're going to do a couple different ones just so you can see. So I'm going to grab this. This is the correct way, geodesic voxel and dual quaternion, and bind skin. I don't think it is a real word. It's Mayanese. So let's bind skin again. This time we'll go to the default method, and then we'll bind skin again on this one. And then we'll use, let's just use heat map and weight blended. Sure. Okay. So each one of those is a different method for how it's taking the joints and connecting them to the skin. That's what that whole process does. So if I were to go into this joint right here, which is the hip, and I rotated it, okay, you can see how it's rotating the hip. You can see how it's like pinching those things behind. If you were to watch a video on rigging, this would be a huge area, because typically what happens is your leg bends up like this, and what happens, or what should happen, is your butt like puffs out because it's like squishing stuff together right there. So your butt actually does like squeeze out a little bit. What rigging does though sometimes is that it pushes it up. So you can see here how it's actually pushing up, which it kind of should, but then this should bulge a little bit, and then that should bulge a little bit too, okay? So this doesn't do that, but it kind of mimics as closely as it can to that. This one, which is the default, you can see how we lost a lot of volume right there. His leg went, or his butt went pretty far in. And you can even see like his tail feathers are also moving. Okay, and if I spin around here, you can see how his chest is moving quite a bit also. Okay, so that's the default. And then let's see this one. Oops, we should do the same leg. And that one's actually not too bad. Look at that. That one's not bad. A lot of it is going to depend too on the model, on the joints, where you put them.
You have to bend the lower part of the leg too, right?
Right, you bend the lower part too. Unless he's dancing. You just keep it up like that. Yeah, so that looks pretty good like that. Yeah, so that other one is working out pretty well also. Uh-oh, look at this one. See, that one is a bad rotation. Right? It's the wrong way. Should have just tried the knee, I guess. So go that way. And then go this way. Oops. And you can see here, this one definitely looks odd compared to the other ones, right? So, what was that?
Why is it looking like
Why? Because what happens is these points that are on the inside are being moved by that rotation. Okay? So as that leg is coming up like this, what should be happening is that it should stay pretty tight right there, but because these points are parented, they're actually like sinking into the arm or leg. Okay? All right. So I could have either used any one of those. So that's the test. As you play with your Chickster, you want to make sure that obviously the deformations are looking good. All right, sweet. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole rigging here, but I would just want you to see some overview parts. On the IK handle tool, this is going to be something different than you did on the initial character. So you're still doing an IK. That's what you did to control the arm, because we don't want to just rotate the legs. We want to actually be able to move the leg. You click on the thigh, and then you click on the ankle, and you get your IK handle. And then you can move it. And again, test out your stuff. Make sure it works. Okay. We always want to have that spot to be able to jump back to resetting this. So part of this will be the same as the last one. We took our IK handle and we grouped it to itself, and then we parented it to something so that we can control it, right? Remember that on the wrist of that guy? We'll still do the same thing here, so I'm not going to cover that part. One part that will be different, though, is that we need something to control his knee a bit more, right? So let's say his foot is up on a box. I want to take his knee and straighten it out, right? We don't have that control inside there. On the IK handle itself, there is a roll and a twist. The roll is not doing it. Twist, there you go. So the twist will do it, but this still doesn't work correctly because if you look at the foot, now the foot's moving. I basically just want to literally move the knee to aim in a different direction, okay? So I'm going to create a locator, and just like in the other one, you can make shapes, and those shapes can represent stuff, so it's easier to figure out what they do. And this locator is going to be an aim for this thing, okay? So this IK handle will aim the knee at that locator. So if I grab the locator first, shift click the IK handle, and then I go to skeleton, I go to constrain, there it is, pull vector, you'll see this line come out and point to the locator. So now if I grab that IK handle and I scoot it up, and then I grab the locator, now I can control which way the leg is bending. Now the foot still moves, but once we have the other controls on the feet, that won't happen, okay? And I'll show you that in a second. So now we have control over which direction that knee is pointing. All right, so we do the same setup on that side, obviously, too. All right, now to get control of the foot here, just like before, we would create some sort of curve or shape or whatever. In this case, I'm just going to use a circle. There we go. Parenting, whatever, the same stuff that we had to do before. Again, you'll see that in the video. I'm just going to jump to the part of making it work. I need to take this controller and I want to be able to rotate this, and that will rotate the foot, okay? So if I click on this circle and I shift click these joints here and I go to constrain, I'm going to go to constrain orient, okay? There are 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yep. 6 constraints here. So parent is basically does position and rotation. So if I parent constrain something, whenever I move it or rotate it, both of those items will happen to it. When I do a point constraint, it's just position. When I do an orient constraint, it's just rotation. You can figure out what scale constraint's going to do. And then aim constraint, I'll show in a second, will actually point objects at other objects. Okay? So for the eye, that's what we're going to use. Cool. Now, show some of these other ones too, because they're actually pretty neat, not only for rigging, but also for modeling. All right, so here is this and that. I'm going to hit add. Boom. There it is. All right, now you'll see that this went crazy, okay? The reason for it is because it's getting rotations from all the other joints that are in the mix, okay? So when it gets down to this ankle, it's like, holy cow, what happened? So every one of these constraints has a box, maintain offset. So I want to say whatever your offset is right now, just leave it. Just let it work the way it is. So I hit add, and it works. So now if I go here and I rotate, you see how I can rotate the foot this way, and I can rotate the foot that way. Now on the set driven for the circle, you will create the curling mechanisms for the toes. That way we can do that kind of thing or that kind of thing. Okay, so on here you'll have some controls that you could then automatically go in here and be able to rotate the toes this way or that way, or even in and out like that a little bit. Okay, sweet. All right, so you'll do some more stuff there. For the eye here, I'm just going to steal this locator. For the eye here, I want a control that allows me to control where the eye is pointing. Okay, I could grab the eye and I could just rotate the eye, but that's not going to be very accurate, especially when we get into sometimes the eye is going to do this like weird, like if you look at it like this, that's weird. He would just look this way or that way or up and down. Our eyes typically don't roll like that. So same setup. When you parent something, you grab the child first, and then you grab the parent. Constraining is the opposite, okay? So constraining, you always grab the constrainer, and then you shift-click the constrained. The way I look at it is that when I'm done with this, the item that is going to be locked is going to be here in the outliner. So I is going to be locked. I need to make sure I click that last. So I'm going to do a constrain aim. Same setup, maintaining my offsets, whatever, and add. Okay. So now when I grab this and move it, now I can control where that eye is actually looking much easier than I could the other way. On a biped with two eyes, you would typically have one control for each eye, and then you would have another control that groups those two things together. So if I do need my character to look left, I can just go like that and he'll look left. Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's how when people, I saw it before, where they have been in a 3D model and then they touch the screen and the character will look like.
Oh, you mean, yeah. Yep, that's the same thing. Our next assignment after this one is we're going to be getting into character stuff. When we get into character stuff, all of these controls that I'm showing you will be used, okay? So you will have a similar kind of foot setup. You will have a similar kind of hand setup that you had in the mech animation, the Pokeball. The eye setup will be very similar. And then there will be extra controls like all over the place, okay? So it's important that you know how these are working because you will need to know how to get to them and how to operate them once you get to a character. Because they will probably have literally 700 controls on the character. All right. So now we can control this thing and have that move around, and it's super sweet. Cool. So now I want to show how I can make, how I can make him blink, okay? Not terribly difficult. You'll notice that he is right now in smooth mode, so if I hit 1, he goes back to rough mode. It's important because that's how many divisions we have. I'm going to go to Window General Editors, Animation Editors, and Shape Editor, okay? So a long time ago, they used to have a thing, it was called, they used to have to do these things called blend shapes, and what would happen is, for every separate face that you wanted your character to have, you would literally have to have a separate model for it. So when you have a character with that many different expressions, you would have to literally have that many faces on there. So if you look at this, this is the mouth, this is the right eye blinking, that's the left eye blinking, this is the right eye's up, this is more of a furrow. Every single one of those gestures, you would have to have a separate face. That makes your, basically your scene huge, and it makes your ability to edit these very, very little, okay? So they've done away with all of that. So if you ever see that, you don't have to do that. The way it's done now is everything is linked to this character. So Maya will, I'm assuming, virtually create these extra heads, and then we can play with them. So I'm going to say I have this skin selected. I'm going to go to Create Blend Shape. Okay, so there's my blend shape. Right now there's nothing on it. If I go to Add Target, this is the shape that I'm going to change. Okay, so right now he's just in a standard pose, just like his eyes open. This one is going to be blink. Okay, and I'm in edit mode, so what that means is whatever I do to him, that's going to be what blink looks like. So I want to shape him like he's blinking. So I'm going to go to my faces. I'm going to grab these. Yep, that looks good. And I will pull that down. I will rotate it a smidge. I'm looking at this line, trying to keep this line lined up with where his eye is at. And then I will rotate that and move that up. Again, lining up that line, pulling this out. You cannot add any extra points after this. So if you get to this point and you're like, oh, I'd like to have 5 more divisions there, you can't do it. If you do it, it'll destroy the entire thing. It does work without it, because I know it, because I created it and people have done it before, so it shouldn't be an issue. I am going to come in with this second row that's up here And start to pull this down and pull this out. Rotate that a bit. There we go. And then I'm going to do a little bit more refined tweaking. I'm just going to start scaling these together here and scaling these together there. And maybe these together here. And then again, same thing. I'm going to grab these. There we go. Okay, so if I hit 3, that's blink. Okay, I can tweak it further, push them down more. So if I now use a slider, there's blink. Okay, very quick. We were able to do that. Now I'm going to hit edit, so we're done editing this, so I don't screw it up. Cool. So now that works. Now the problem is I don't want to have that thing up all the time. Typically what happens is, and this is like how you would animate something, if you watch people when they move their eyes from like left to right, unless it's like a shifty way that they're looking, they typically will blink and then look that way or this way. Okay, so eye movement and blinking are actually like tied together, right? That makes sense. So what I would do is if I go to the attribute editor, so I hit Control A, and then I go to my blend shape here, you'll see that blink is listed as one of these items. So what I would do is I would do a set driven connection editor expression, whatever it is, so that I could have my blend shape controlled by this locator. So that as I'm moving the eye left and right, I can also make the character blink left and or up and down. So let's say that I'm going to just copy this tab so I have it so I don't lose it. There we go. I'm going to go to that thing and I'm going to add my attributes. Blink. I don't think I need 10. That seems like excessive, right? 2 or 1. Let's just go 1. Okay, so now I have a blink controller right here. I want to control this blink with it. In the Pokeball, you bend through connection editor, you bend through expressions, you bend through set driven. It doesn't matter. Any of them will work. Pick one and do it. Okay. I'm going to use just connection editor because it literally is the same thing. 0 to 1 is the numbers. If I did on my set driven 0 to 10, then I would have to do an expression or a set driven. You guys distracted me. Where am I going? Connection editor. There's one thing in mind that they really should have is a find. They should just like, if I can right click and just type it in, I should be able to pull up that menu. All right, so there's my output, which is my blink on my locator. My input will be my blend shape. So I'm going to say blink will control blink. Target. There it is, under weight, blink. Okay, so now if I grab this, then I should be able to go to blink. Awesome. Now, how many frames do you think it takes for a blink? About 5 frames is a good number, okay? If you go typically 2 down and 3 up, that's a good number to go with, okay? If you go 1 or 1.5, you're not going to see anything. Right. Oh, you might have time. Yeah. Oh, a second for blink. Yeah. So if you animate him blinking, which you will, that's a good value to go with. So I would literally go here and set a keyframe. I would go up 5 frames, set a keyframe. Remember the bouncing ball when we went through and set our 0 points and then came back and set our high points? You know, we can do the same thing here. And I'll go to 7 and set 1. All right. So now, there it is. If it wasn't playing back super slow, it looks like a good blink. Now, what's cool about that is once we have that blink set up, we can copy that whole blink thing here. And if he has like a twitch or something, then we can really make him blink. So I'm just pasting that blink over and over and over again, and very quickly I can just make him have a little bit more life to him. And then while I'm at it, let's change his position here. So let's go to this. So we'll pretend he's looking this way. A couple extra hotkeys you can write down. If you want to set just position, rotation, or scale hotkeys, Do you know what the hotkey is just to get to the position, the move tool, the rotate tool, and the scale tool? Right? You know what those are? So you just hit shift and that key. So if I only want to set position keyframes or translate, shift W sets only translate. Shift E sets only rotate. Shift R sets only scale. Okay? So it's a quick way to be able to do that. There you go. And let me go here. I'm going to do that again on this one. I'm going to go shift W here, go up to this, there. That's right. Okay. So here's just some basic movement of his eye. But you can see how creepy it looks when his eye just like goes like that. Right? Now when we get into these kinds of things, so we're past the bouncing ball and the Game of Thrones and the stick and all this stuff, now we can actually start to think about, you know, the actual mechanics of how this would move. The guy wouldn't just stand there like this and just like turn his eye without turning his head also, or bobbing his neck, or doing something else, okay? So the animation for this, the end product of this, is you're going to do a walk cycle, and then you're going to sort of kind of duplicate these, and you'll have like a whole cluster of these guys running. That's the end goal of that, okay? So you won't have a lot of finessing that you're doing with him looking left and right or whatever, but just stuff to keep in mind when you start doing it. So you'll go through the whole rigging part of this in the video. You'll see how to do every single piece I did in more detail than I just did. Okay. So you'll go through the whole mess of that. Now, stuff that is not included on that, but obviously important because we should talk about it at some point, are the rest of these constraints, because when we get into other rigging things, those will be important. So just so we can see, I should actually create two different objects so it's a little bit easier to see. Create. There we go. Okay. So when we do a parent constraint, it's taking these items and actually connecting them, their position and their rotation. So if I reset it, you'll see there's maintain offset. I could also turn on just translate, or turn off translate, or rotate. I could also lock just one item. So if I only want my translate X to be controlled by this item and not Y and Z, I can do that too, okay? You could also do these exact things using expressions. The only difference is I can keyframe these on and off. So whenever you see a 3D character grab something and pick it up, it's actually a parent constraint. Because if the item is just parented, then it's always with them and they can't set it down, okay? So when we do a parent constraint, we can turn it on and turn it off. That way the character can actually interact with something temporarily. So if I parent constrain, I hit add. Now when I grab the locator and move it, you'll see that the sphere moves with it. And when I rotate, the sphere rotates with it, okay? So if this was a hand, then the hand could grab the ball and move it wherever. Cool. Then there's point. So originally, parent was not part of the group. It was just point, orient, and then the other ones. Point is simply parent without rotate. Okay, so it's just translate information. Same thing, maintain offset. It'll move with it. It will not rotate with it though. Okay, and then orient's the same thing. It will just rotate, not move. It's the same thing as parent without the translate instead of the other one. Okay, so you can ignore these two unless you have a very specific use of why you want to use these two over just going to parent and turning this on or turning that off. Okay, they're literally the same thing. Scale, like I said, it's the same thing, just grabbing this and it connects the two scales together. We did aim, we did pole vector, motion paths, and I don't have anything we need to worry about right now. Point on poly is a cool one. So let's say you had a character, you modeled a button, and you wanted the button to stick on him or whatever. You can grab a point on the polygon. Oops, there you do this the other way. This, that. Oh my god. There we go. Target must be of type mesh. That. That. Must have it backwards. No, I don't. Create polygon cube. There we go. So now this sphere, it wouldn't let me do it with locator for some reason, is locked to that item. So now when I move this, that sphere is staying locked to that point. So if I had a character, they were moving around, whatever, that item would stay locked in. Just to go into something dynamic, because dynamics is awesome. Let's go to here. Let's make this big. Let's add some divisions. Sweet. I'm going to make this an end cloth. So if I go to end cloth and I say create, and then I go to this item and that item, and I say end cloth passive collider, and then I rewind it and hit play. Awesome, right? And then I need to make it a little bit stickier so it doesn't like drape off, because that's disgusting. A little bit of drag, a little bit of damping. There we go. That should be good. And where are my collisions? Stickiness. There we go. Cool. Okay, so hit that. Much better. Okay, so now I'll create an object like my button. We'll go here. We'll smooth it out because it should be smooth, right? That looks like a button. All right, so same thing. I'll grab this. I'll grab a point. Grabbing the wrong order. That's what I'm doing. There we go. And then I'll scale it down so obviously it looks a little bit better. Come on. There we go. So now we hit play, and there it goes. As you can see how it like stays stuck to that area, which again is, I think, super awesome. We can also do a constraint to geometry. So this is where I would use this for kind of modeling stuff. I have used it for modeling stuff. Right. So I have this cone here, and what I want to do is I want to lock this cone to this item so that as I move this item, the cone stays like locked on it on that surface. So if I grab the sphere, I shift click that, and I say geometry, what happens is the cone is now locked to this piece of geometry. So as I move it, you'll see how that item is like staying stuck to it. Okay. Now, where could this be useful? If I needed an object to travel along this sphere, as I move this around, you'll see how it's like locked to it. No matter where I move this, it's staying locked to this shape. It's not moving off of the shape at all. Okay, so it's a pretty neat way to do it. Now, if I want to get it to point away from it, because right now it's basically staying straight up, I click the sphere, shift click that, and then I do a normal constraint. Now, in this case, it constrained it the opposite direction I wanted. It's like going this way up, or it thinks that way is up, and I wanted this way to be up. All of the constraints have controls on them for you to play with. So if I go to my normal constraint, and I take my aim vector to 0 and my aim vector to 1 there. There we go. So I did the aim vector is 1 and y, so that the top of it is pointing up. And then the up vector is just x or z. That doesn't matter, it's just either one. So now as I move this, you can see how it's moving away from that surface wherever I move it. Okay, so again, think of like if you had a little creature, a mouse, a bug, whatever, and it needed to walk along a surface like that, that's a perfect way to do it. Think of Wall-E when he has that little cockroach thing climbing all over him. Right? Same thing. We have to make sure that he follows along it. The least amount of work we have to do, the better. So the fact they can just constrain him and have him automatically rotate around the surfaces, much easier. What else? Tangent is similar to that, but it goes the other way. I've never used it, so we can ignore it. Sweet. Okay, Now the other thing with these is that they're all based on their pivot. So if you look at this, you'll see that the pivot of this cone is where it's being constrained from. So if I push that pivot in more, there we go. It just took a second update. I push that pivot in more, like that. And then I switch back and then I try to move it, it'll pop up to the correct spot. Okay? So that could be a good way to set stuff up. All right. These constraints are really awesome. You can do a lot with them. When you get into your rig, you will definitely see how all of these things are kind of working together. On the characters that you're going to see, all of them have been rigged 3 times, one for FK, one for IK, and one for like the combined version of both. They're insane, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into them. All right, so this is simple stuff compared to what they are doing on theirs. I can delete that too. I don't need that. And this. Cool. All right. So once you're done with Pokeball, you can start on Chickster. Even while your Pokeball is rendering, you can still open a new Maya and still work on this stuff while that one is going. This one, rigging-wise, is not as complicated as Pokeball. It should be as far as rigging. Only take maybe a class or 2 to do the rigging, and then probably a class or 2 to do the animation part and then get it rendering. Okay? So we basically have about 2 weeks on this guy here. We are at 9 weeks. That's what today is. It's crazy how quick this is already going. Next week, I'm going to start talking about character stuff so that you can start researching which character you want to use, and we'll be using that character for the rest of the semester. Okay? We'll be doing poses. We'll be doing animations with the character. I closed all my windows, of course. Why would I keep them open?